So I recently asked this question: should an Igbo woman or should a woman change her ancestral name after marriage? Now, I got a lot of responses, which I'm going to upload in a slideshow and show you people. Now, I am impressed that a lot of our men were of the opinion that it does not really matter. And some said that from an Igbo standpoint, that the changing of the name practice is not ours. It is something that we got from other people. So there is no issue if my wife or my spouse does not change. And we now have this category of men who were of the opinion that, oh, I paid her bride price, oh, she should stay back in her father's house if he does not want to change the name. So everybody was just airing their opinions. Some people I engaged to it, some I just ignored, like this one that said that she should be glad that I'm giving her more respect by taking up my name. And I was like, wait, she does not have any respect prior to meeting you. Now she now has to meet you, marry you, for her to find her self-worth and have respect. But he responded, but I didn't really want to go into it, so I just ignored. And it is part of this ridiculousness that we encounter, women encounter, that people, some persons believe that because you're married, I'm married to you, I own you. But from an Igbo cultural perspective, ownership does not exist. You don't own somebody. So if we say that, oh, when a woman gets married, she's been owned by her spouse, what then stopped our ancestors from keeping slaves? What then stopped our ancestors from keeping slaves? And we also forget that this ownership mentality promotes domestic violence, because the man is now operating from the notion that I am married to you, and because I have done that, I have the right to treat you anyway, anyhow I want, because I now own you. You're virtually my property. So I'm going to get into it, but I'm just want to start with these snippets of information before I get down to what I want to talk about. Now, first of all, because of a European influence, Igbo we are battling with understanding and separating our indigenous culture from what is foreign to us. We are now battling with social dissonance, economic dissonance, cognitive dissonance. We are dealing with a lot of issues that with some of the cultures that we have accepted and adopted as our own culture, as it's been an intricate aspect of our foundation. It is not an intricate aspect of our foundation. It is something we learned. It's something that we took because of cultural evolution and because of cultural diffusionism, which is a process whereby certain aspects or traits of culture exist within other culture, and because of social interaction, other culture assimilated and adopted and internalized a culture that is not fundamentally our own or theirs. Now, this whole thing about changing name, it evolves around the practice of things that in Igbo we adopted. Christianity is part of cultural diffusionism, something that we adopted that is not fundamentally part of our indigenous foundations as in Igbo. Now, in this conversation or discussion of a changing of ancestral names, we need to understand that names form attachment to a person's identity. Your name forms an attachment to you. This is why subconsciously you can just be walking on the street and somebody calls your name. The person might not be referring to you or talking to you. The person can just call your name. Maybe the person is talking to somebody on your phone and on his or her phone, and you and that person he is talking to has or shares the same name. Now, once they call that name, subconsciously you will turn, you would answer. You'll be like, oh, sorry, not you. So you see that you have formed a subconscious attachment to that name and to that identity. So we need to be aware of what a name is to a person. Because I'm of the opinion that aside culture or religious beliefs or social systems, we need to see a man and a woman as fundamentally human being, as a person, before we now talk about other social attachments or gender roles that we are, all the social expectations, societal expectations that we have for that person. We need to first of all see a man and a woman as fundamentally a human being first of all, before other forms of attachment. This is why I'm of the opinion that our names, they form personal attachments to our identity. It is the root of who we are. Aside from whatever the society says it is, our names it forms that attachment to us first of all. So because names forms an attachment, it makes the changing of name a very personal thing to a person. And it is often laden with social expectations. What the society values, what the society expects of you. Like currently in our social system, once a woman is married, the society expects her to change her name. So it's tallies, it is laden with social expectations and historical traditions. So when a person has this name, there is so many memories, there are so many stories that are attached to that person's name. So if we just tell that person, change your name, or we just have these social expectations that the person should change her name, we need to understand if there is a drawback or a kind of a resistance from the woman. We need to understand where it is coming from. We should not just look at women that don't want to change their name, or people that want to kind of have a compound name where they now hyphenate their ancestral name and their husband's name, and we just say, oh, this person is just being difficult. We need to understand the roots of that resistance, where it is coming from. And I also want to make us know that in this course of this conversation, there is no right or wrong answer. It all depends on this whole thing about changing it. It depends on the couple. It depends on the people that are in that marriage, in the union. So everybody, we need to find a way to accommodate each other's opinion in this issue of changing names or not changing names. This is why I said that we need to be kind to women who decide to keep their ancestral name, or those that choose to hyphenate both names. We need to be kind to them because of the attachment that we have with our names. Now, when the argument of is it compulsory for a woman to change her ancestral name from an ancestral perspective, from an Igbo traditional ancestral perspective, is it compulsory? Now, it is not compulsory. It is not compulsory, and I'm going to try to give a cultural context to why I'm telling you that from an Igbo indigenous perspective, it is not compulsory for a woman to take up the name of her husband. Now, we need to know that the usage of surnames, as we see it today, is part of cultural evolution and diffusion. Like I said earlier, we picked it from other people, and we've now positioned it as our own culture. But initially, in those days, we were known by our own birth name. We were known by these birth names. Now, after being known by these birth names, and we're also known through our genealogy. For instance, if your name is Mado Abuchi, you would be known as Mado Abuchi, son of Ejizu, which is your father, and the son of Obajaka, your father's father. Kanso Igbo. Aga amagi as a Mado Abuchi, nwa Ejizu, nwa Obajaka. This is how they are going to trace your lineage. This is how they are going to call you. Now, if it is a woman, they will know the woman as Ogechi, daughter to Ejizu, and wife to Amobi. Nso Igbo. Ọ bụrụ nwaanyị, a ga-ama ya ka Ogechi, Nwe Jizu, Munya Mobi. They are knowing you by your first or birth name and not the surname. So because of this, it now shows our lineage. It shows your lineage. If you're not referring to the man, it is showing the man's lineage. If you're making reference to the woman, it is showing her lineage and her achievements, the various stages that she has lived. First, she was known as the daughter to this person. Now, secondly, she's now being known as the wife to this person. So if they want to trace her, this is how they are going to trace her. Daughter to this person and the wife to this person. Now, this explanation that I've just given, it now fuels our understanding of this proverb. Now, a woman belongs to two obi or two lineage. The lineage that gives birth to her and the lineage she is going to be married into. These are the two lineage that a woman on agbanye, which means that if she chooses to take one name or drop the other one, it is culturally acceptable. If she decides to hyphenate the both of them, it is culturally acceptable because she belongs to these two lineage. She belongs to these two people. Now, this is, I was looking at a chart and somebody could have said that for a married woman, there are 5 kinds of ajani that you are supposed to venerate. The first one is the ajani of your father's house. The second one is the ajani of your maternal home, ipunegi. The third one is the ajani of your father's maternal home, ipunenage. The fourth one is the maternal home of your mother, ipunne negi. And the last one is your husband's ajani. Now, and again, if you're not looking at this whole change of name from a spiritual perspective, from an ordinary perspective, we will now also see that during the process of Ijo Ebafa or Ijo Hese, the most appropriate name for a woman to use is her father's name. Because some people will go to Afa, if the Dibia is divine and on Abafa na Achihari Afa, the Dibia gets confused. Afa na Achihari. The divination would not really be straightforward. Ona Achihari. And most times what the man would do is to ask. And for some people, they would ask, what is your father's name? Call your father's surname. And the moment she uses her father's surname, her Afa will begin to align. Then why is it? Her spiritual foundation, it is still that of her father's house. Her spiritual or her ancestors, because suddenly marriage does not mean that the ancestors of her husband would automatically overshadow her own ancestor from the obi that she's coming from. The ancestors of her father, of her husband's house, will see her as their wife, as Muniha, but they will not serve her in the capacity that the ancestors that are coming from her father's house would serve her. So this is why when a married man wants to go to the wafa, she uses her father's name. It is very potent and it is more active. This is to tell you that even in our spirituality, a woman not changing her name, it is not a death sentence. It is not a death sentence. They still accept it because they know where your roots belongs and where your root is coming from. Now, because a woman's foundational spirit is still becoming from her father's house and still belongs to Okabayan. This is why in ancient Igbo society, Igbo women were buried in their father's house. This is where you now see this aphorism, Isimwada Ada Atonamba. Isimwada Ada Atonamba. So if a woman dies in a land that is not her ancestral home, they would take her back to her father's house. This is because what makes you who you are it is still coming from your father's traditional ancestral roots. And it does not end there. But because of civil war and the religious influence, these two circumstances, it now changed how we do things, which means that what it now did here is that instead of us burying our women in their father's house, we now began to bury our women in their husband's house. And what they gave here is that they cited the bride price now as the reasons why she's supposed to be buried in her father's house. Now, this whole thing now created this whole narrative of ownership. That because now they've paid her bride price, she now belongs to her husband and his people. It now created this mindset of ownership. And even when they now began to practice this thing of burying a woman in her husband's house, it created a new kind of problem for the Igbo that now resulted to the Igbo practice of Igbo's Nwada. You now see, because you cannot cheat spirits. You cannot cheat a spirit. That's one thing that I have kind of realized as researching and talking to my elders. You cannot cheat spirits. Ogahudule, you're going to give her that right. Now, the church and the war, because of these two events, they came with the notion that a woman should be buried in her husband's house because, quote unquote, maybe in their religious mindset, the husband has purchased her. But it now created a problem that led to the practice of Igbo's Nwada. This is where it is like Navy now, in my place in the Navy. If I die, as they're burying me in my husband's house, they're also burying me in my father's house. Before they even take me to my husband's house, they first of all take me to my father's house. My umunda, my family members, they would see me. Then the women that were born in my lineage, in my father's compound, they are going to bury me in their own way. They would bury me in their own way in my husband's house. They will first of all bury me before the Omunna from my husband's house will start to bury me. Or doing whatever thing that I do. So this whole thing now created a cultural practice of Igbo's Nwada. And any woman, it can differ in different communities. What I just gave here is Otundi Benam Otanyisi Eme Igbo's Nwada. So we do it, but it is an offshoot of the negligence of because of war. Who would be able to take back the corpse, especially if it is if the person was not married within her own community. So it became a problem. But in those days, in ancient society, they buried a woman in her father's house and not her husband's house. Now, I've told you the reason, because of her foundational spirit. Able can enable Gisuwe again. Now, our ancestors finding this loophole of Igbo's Nwada, it did not change or remove the mindset of ownership that most men have when they marry a woman, which gives most of these men the mindset that a woman must change her name after her bride price or her imego has been carried out. Now, what is bride price within the Igbo traditional construct? What is imego nwanyị, bride price? Imego nwanyị is a symbolic practice of showing gratitude and acknowledging the efforts made by those who raised the woman. You're not buying anything. You don't own people in Igbo indigenous culture. But rather, bride price is a symbolic practice of showing gratitude and acknowledging the efforts made by those who raised the woman. And bride price also legitimizes children born from that union. It shows that this child belongs to you as a man, even if you're not biologically, even if you're not the biological father or parents to those children. So far, the children belongs to you. So bride price legitimizes children born from a union, and also it also legitimizes them as members of a lineage. So you will not say because maybe your wife cheated, or because the children are no longer yours and they're no longer part of your lineage. That is not true. So far, imegego isinwani. It is first of all, it's a symbolic way of showing that you're thanking the parents, you're thanking them and showing gratitude for the efforts they put in raising that child that you're marrying. And secondly, it legitimizes children that are born from that union and makes them bona fide members of your lineage as a man. So this is the cultural context, the interpretation of what bride price means. Bride price had never meant ownership of any sort. You cannot own a person. It has never meant ownership. But when people talk about changing of names, they will say, because I've married you, because now because I paid your bride price, it is my right to get you to change your name and your identity to my own. It is not. It has never been about that. So we need to start correcting these mindsets. We need to start correcting these problems, this perception, and see bride price for what it truly is and not what it isn't. Now, finally, I concluded here that whether an Igbo woman chooses to change her ancestral name after marriage or not, we need to accept that it is a matter of personal choice, because by her cultural right of Ebanye Dobinab, she has the right and the choice to choose whether to change her ancestral name, hyphenate the ancestral name, or to simply continue bearing her father's name. But that does not mean that her children would bear her own father's name. Her children would bear your name. This is where Imegowanye comes in. It legitimizes children born from a union as members of your own lineage and members of your own family. And let us not forget that the Igbo we call Inowanye marriage EJD. I think in a one jere EJD. And when you say somebody in a marriage EJD, what are they trying to say? It means that the person jere your emotion, you went somewhere, and once you're done, you would still return back to wherever you're coming from. So this name of EJD has eradicated any other derogatory, toxic, patriarchal meanings of women being owned within the African context and whatever thing that we see as being toxic. Because EJD means that Jagaraja must come back. Once you're done, you go back to your roots. And if you tell somebody that this person goes back, you're not saying that you own that person. You're not saying that you own that person. You cannot say that you own that person, because EJD has nullified any of those interpretations and any of those meanings. So this video is getting too long, so I still have other things that I wrote, like some perspective to consider when maybe your partner says, I don't want to change my father's name, can I hyphenate, or can I just continue bearing my father's name? Because we need to start being merciful as people. Imagine raising a child from nursery to primary school, and this daughter of yours has so many achievements, so many accolades, has a brand name, and a man that has not contributed to that child during his developmental stage comes in and suddenly says it is my right for her to change her name Well, we need to be considerate as human beings. Cultures evolve. We went from a time where surname was not really a thing to when surname is now a thing, and we now somehow think that if women are saying, because the church came and basically popularized this whole thing of changing your name, changing your husband, your ancestral, a woman changing her ancestral name to her husband's name. Christianity came and popularized it. So, but we need to be considerate. Now, I was looking at some perspectives when I talked about cultural significance, personal identity, family tradition, marital union, hybrid approach, and legal and social considerations towards things that we should consider when we're trying to bring these conversations to the table, so we don't just sound ignorant and thinking that we are right. But maybe I will try to make a video on these considerations and offer another perspective. It's going to be in another video. This is getting too long and I'm going to edit, so I'm going to stop here. And if you like this content, if you like my opinions, the information that I shared here, also don't forget to air your views via the comment section and let me hear what you have to say. And until next time, don't forget to subscribe and follow me on all my social media. And until next time, yeah guys, yeah.